Hello, everyone. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. We got an action-packed show for you today. We're going to cover it all. COVID, Long Island serial killer, aliens, Russia, Ukraine, politics if there's time, veteran suicide, theater, drugs, you name it. We got it all covered for you for the next 4 hours. But today is April 20th, which is the marijuana holiday. Now, it is interesting. I have a confession to make. I have never smoked marijuana or vaped marijuana or done marijuana in any form. The closest I've come to marijuana is being in the room when people have smoked marijuana around me. And I have felt at times that I was getting a little bit of a contact high, but I've never ingested marijuana in any form. And it's not because I'm some big moralist. Look, I'm drunk more often than not. It's just because I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the last thing I need is something that's going to make me more hungry. So I've never really been a marijuana person. I have a lot of friends that have smoked marijuana, and they're fine. I know some other people that smoke marijuana, and they get a little wacky. So I know it affects different people in different ways. And I know a lot of people can smoke marijuana once, twice, 3 times, 20 times, and then live perfectly normal and productive lives. And the reason we're talking about this now is not just because it's the marijuana holiday, 420, which came about initially because there was this group of teenagers in California that would ritualistically smoke marijuana every day at 420 at 420. And so then it became 420, the calendar date, then it became April 20th. So the reason we're talking about this now, though, is because tomorrow, April 21st, is the first day, as I understand it, that you will be able to legally purchase marijuana in the state of New Jersey. Now, it's lucky news for both Matt and Molly, Matt Lee collectively. They live in the state of New Jersey. They're looking forward to getting online and purchasing some marijuana. But there is an aspect of this new law that I haven't really heard anybody talk about. So, if you're a police officer and you are off duty, there's nothing wrong with having a drink. And then you presumably are not under the influence of alcohol, as long as you give yourself enough time to sober up by the time that you're on duty. Now, if you take a drink on duty, there's something really troublesome about that. But they can always find out if they do a breathalyzer. So here is the aspect of the new marijuana law that I haven't heard many people discuss. So the first legal recreational marijuana sales are coming Thursday. In advance of this, a couple of days ago, Acting Attorney General Matt Platkin issued a memo informing New Jersey law enforcement agencies that the state's marijuana legalization law, the one that the state of New Jersey passed, governor signed, bars them from punishing cops who use legally obtained cannabis while off duty. Follow? So cops in the state of New Jersey, the Garden State, will be able to smoke to smoke cannabis legally off duty. But this has created quite a stir, with a lot of people raising what I think are valid points that I feel have not been addressed. So the Attorney General's memo was not a police directive. He was telling them what the law was, or at least how his office interprets it. And so far, no one said anything different, that he has a flawed interpretation. So several politicians from both parties, Assemblymember Beth Sawyer, Republican, State Senators Joe Cryan and Paul Sarlo, Democrats, they've taken issue with this. Plotkin, the Attorney General, noted that cops, of course, can be punished for being under the influence at work. So here is the question, which now these legislators have raised, and I haven't heard anybody address, at least not to my satisfaction. How do you know? How do you know if a cop is high on marijuana while on duty? We're joined by a man who knows a great deal about medicine and a great deal about economics and a great deal about probably everything. He's a professor of medicine at Stanford University, a research associate with the National Bureau of Economics Research, and a senior fellow at the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research. It's exhausting just reading this guy's resume. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. Dr. Bhattacharya, it is always a treat to talk with you. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Frank.
So, Dr. Bhattacharya, I want to talk to you primarily about COVID and what some places are doing to bring back certain restrictions. But while I have you on the phone, do you have any thoughts? A caller just called in a few minutes ago asking about the health hazards of recreational marijuana smoking. Do you have any thoughts on that, or is there any consensus about what the medical community has said on that front?
I mean, I think there's still some controversy. I mean, that there's it's largely, but you know, there are folks who respond in ways that are not you know, not healthy sometimes. I'd also say that it depends on the dose, and it depends on how frequently you use it. So it's not. I mean, as with anything, it's going to depend on the individual. It's also going to depend on sort of if you take it in moderation or not.
Well, I guess that could be said of alcohol or so much. All right. We're seeing a lot of headlines all about the COVID surge, about the COVID uptick, not only in the United States, but around the world. Based on what you're seeing, is it time for people to start worrying yet? How bad is this COVID surge getting around the world?
I mean, I think this surge is less peaks at a lower level than the Omicron surge. The Omicron surge, the key thing is not so much the virus itself. The key thing is that the population it's meeting has a lot more immunity than the population than, for instance, the original Wuhan variant met. A very large fraction of the population have had COVID and recovered, and so they're relatively protected against severe disease if they get infected. Same thing with the vaccine. The vaccine also protects against severe disease. It doesn't stop you from getting the virus, but it does stop you from having prevent you from having very a really bad result, leading to hospitalizations or death. And that's why hospitalizations are actually pretty low now compared to where it's been for most of the pandemic. So I'm not so much focused on the surge itself. I'm more focused on the fact that the population is relatively immune compared to what it once was.
So unless we see those numbers of hospitalizations or, God forbid, deaths start to tick up, nobody should be worried yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have certain chronic conditions, or if you're older, or especially if you're not vaccinated and never had the disease before, you should get the vaccine. Get it. Maybe the other thing is there are also better treatments available. There's treatments like the Paxlovid, which have been approved, so especially if you're in a vulnerable, condition, you definitely should have on hand those doses of those drugs, so that if you do get sick, you can take it early in the disease. So I'm not saying do nothing. What I'm saying is don't worry. Just take actions based on what we know, which is, if you're already, if you're unvaccinated and you're older, please get vaccinated. If get doses of Paxlovid around. For the rest of the population, don't worry so much. Live your life.
China is apparently instituting the worst lockdown in Shanghai since the very beginning of this pandemic 2 years ago. They have this policy in China of COVID zero, and it's apparently leading to very draconian measures in China. Two questions on this front. One is the variant, as best you know, is the variant that China is dealing with now a new variant? And do we have any reason to believe that it is more or less dangerous than what we've been through already with the grade A Wuhan variant, Omicron, or anything else?
I think it's the Omicron variant. It might be some of the BA2 variant that's going around also, but I think it's the Omicron variant. The key thing there, though, is that their COVID zero policy, which they followed through the whole pandemic, now is revealed to be a utter failure. They have now, hundreds of millions of people in lockdown states with basically what you call a human rights violation. They're separating parents from kids. They have killed household pets like cats and dogs. They, sort of locked people in the house. In Shanghai, there are reports of people essentially unable to get food for a month. It's a catastrophic failure of a policy, and it won't achieve its goal. The disease spreads regardless of policies like this because it's a very highly infectious disease, and you have no choice but eventually you have to come out. So I think the idea of COVID zero, and there's also animal vectors of this. So the idea of COVID zero, I think, unfortunately, the Chinese policy shows us it was a folly to even think it was possible to do that. The best we can really do is live with the virus. But with the tools we have, we can live with the virus without so much harm as we had early in the pandemic.
So already this COVID zero policy and the accompanying lockdowns in Shanghai have had a devastating impact on China's economy. And except for the price of gas in America maybe ticking down a little bit because Chinese motorists aren't driving to work, this has the potential to have a pretty devastating impact on the American economy as well. Not only because of the stock market and things of that nature, but because the American economy is so interconnected with China. My question is for you, Dr. Bhattacharya, is irrespective of what people might think of the leadership of China, and I've certainly been very critical, they know how to add. They see what this is doing to their economy, and they see that the original lockdown policy was ineffective at stopping the spread of COVID. Why would they do this? What is the possible rationale?
I don't know for certain, but what I've seen is that the Chinese leadership took a lot of pride in their success with COVID while the rest of the world suffered, their parents' success with COVID. And they trapped themselves in their own rhetoric. And so unless they get COVID to zero using these draconian policies, which unfortunately to say will ultimately fail, regardless of the catastrophe they're causing, they'd rather have that. They'd likely view it as a threat to their own success as a government unless they get COVID to zero with these policies. They've essentially fooled the rest of the world into adopting these policies, and now they're trapped by their own apparent success.
Who do you think should be getting the booster? Are you an advocate that everybody that's eligible for getting the booster should get boosted, or are you somebody that thinks only those at-risk populations, the elderly, and those with pre-existing conditions, those folks should be the ones getting the booster?
I think it's like any medical thing, it should be something that depends on the patient, right? So, for instance, if you've got 2 vaccine doses and then also a COVID recovered, you have pretty complete protection. The booster doesn't provide a ton of protection above and beyond for people like that. Now, there could be exceptions. So, for instance, again, older people might need to get boosted even though they got COVID already. So I think it really depends on your particular clinical condition, and it's something you should talk with your doctor. I'm very uncomfortable with public health making blanket medical advice when they don't really know the situation of the patient. I think instead they should be telling people, go seek good advice from your doctor about whether it's appropriate. For the biggest bonus, the biggest benefit, it comes to people who've never had the disease before and have not been vaccinated.
Yeah, I knew there was a reason I haven't seen you in these commercials telling people that you've never met exactly what sort of treatment they should be pursuing. I'm very pleased to tell you that last week I signed a new contract here with the radio station to extend my time here as the host of The Other Side of Midnight for another 3 years. Woo! So I got to tell you, I'm sure if I do something crazy or if people stop listening to the show, they can get rid of me. But I am ecstatic that I'm going to get to do this for another 3 years. Absolutely over the moon. This is what I'm doing right now is what I've always dreamed about doing my entire life. And the fact that I get to do this for a living and I am going to get to do it for another 3 years is just about the greatest thing in the world. And a lot of times I just have to pinch myself to not just for the vicarious or the non-vicarious thrill, the thrill of pinching oneself, but to make sure I'm not dreaming, because it seems like a dream come true. So a big thank you to John and Margot Katzimatidis, our owners, for making this possible. And a big thank you to our president, Chad Lopez, and everybody here at management of this radio station, because I'm pretty excited about this. And we have some interesting things in the pipeline for the rest of this year, and we have some interesting things in the pipeline, hopefully, for the next couple of years as well. So hopefully the audience will continue to grow, and I want to thank you for listening, and it's largely your patronage that has made the success of this show possible. So thank you. And I'm going to make a prediction that everything you're about to hear is untrue. Alexei Navalny is a Russian dissident, and look, he's had a hard time, to say the least, because of his criticism of Vladimir Putin, and I think he's shown a lot of courage. Now, Alexei Navalny is saying that Russian troops killed a man for sharing his surname. That's what he's saying. This is based on an unconfirmed report. Alexei Navalny shared a photo of Ilya Navalny, and apparently this is a man that's been killed in Bucha, Ukraine. And I'm sure as Ilya Navalny was killed in Ukraine, he was just thrilled that Russian runners will no longer be allowed to participate in the Boston Marathon. I'm sure that made his death all the more easier for his family to take. I'm being a little facetious. But my question, and I read a number of articles on this, how does Alexei Navalny know that this guy was killed because of his last name? I mean, so this Alexei Navalny, this Kremlin critic, is saying that Russian soldiers killed this Ukrainian who shares his last name. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that lived in Bucha and died. Why would the Russian soldiers choose to kill this guy just because he has Navalny's last name? It makes no sense. So So Reuters has not been able to verify this. The New York Post has not been able to verify this. So far, nobody has been able to verify this except Alexei Navalny. I'm not disputing the fact that someone with the last name of Navalny was killed by the Russians. Unfortunately, that's what happens with war. It's one of the reasons war is so terrible. I'm not even disputing that war crimes might have been committed. I'm saying for them to say, well, he was killed for having the same last name, it doesn't make any sense. Makes no sense. For millennia, humans have stared up at the sky, looked up at the stars, and wondered what's out there. Well, for the last 60 or 70 years, which is not very long in the grand scheme of things, we have begun to explore exactly what's out there. And I have always been fascinated, as I'm sure so many of you have, by continuing to wonder what's out there beyond what we know here on Earth and beyond what we see. Somebody who does a great job not only wondering and asking a lot of the questions that many of us ask, but actually providing some answers, is Amy Shira Teitel. She's an author. She's a popular science writer. She's a space flight historian, a YouTuber, and the author of a fascinating book that a lot of people are talking about, Fighting for Space, the incredible true story of the female pilots who each dreamed of being the first American woman in space. Amy, thanks so much for coming on the radio with me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Amy, your book has gotten a lot of attention, deservedly so, and you chronicle everything going back to the Mercury 13 program and so the rest of the history of women in space. Give us a Reader's Digest version of what the contribution to the American space program women have played.
Well, women have played a very important part in the space program since its inception. I mean, the women played a sort of a hidden role. You know, if you're looking back at the '60s, the men were what you saw. To use the iceberg metaphor, and then everything under the water was all the engineers, all the doctors, and there were a lot of women who were specialists. Whether they were astronomers teaching the celestial navigation for going to the moon, or they were the seamstresses making the parachutes that allowed them to land safely after a trip. Women have always had a really important role. It's just that it took women longer to kind of get into that center spotlight role as astronauts, because there were a lot of limitations in what women could do, both in the military as pilots, and that kind of fed into the astronaut corps until about the late 70s, when women were able to start serving as astronauts.
And who was the first female astronaut in the United States?
The first American woman was Sally Ride in 1983. So, a few years, a couple decades into the space age, it was we first saw the first American woman to fly in space.
How have other countries like Russia, how have they been in terms of incorporating women into their space flights?
About the same. Valentina Terracova was the first woman in space, and she flew a full 20 years before Sally Ride. She flew in 1963, but she actually flew because of the press that American female pilots were garnering about their fight to actually join the astronaut corps in the early 60s. There was so much media attention around this idea of women taking on NASA for what they felt was their fair shot in space, that the Soviets kind of said, well, listen, I mean, it was let's be real, the space race was a giant one-upsmanship contest. So the Soviets, looking at this media, were saying, well, if they're going to do this, we need to pull the rug out from under them again and score another first in space. Soviets had first satellite, first human, first living thing in space, a lot of firsts. And they launched Terracova to get that first. And they actually launched the second woman in space as well in 1982, because NASA announced that Sally Ride was going up, and they wanted to beat NASA one more time. You
write that what I referenced earlier, the term or the name Mercury 13, which I think a lot of people have heard over the years, that name Mercury 13 was inaccurate, that it was invented actually much later by a Hollywood producer in the 1990s. Any other public misconceptions about the Mercury 13 program that you can clear up?
Oh, so many. The myth of what I kind of call the myth of the Mercury 13 was that there was this group of 13 women who had the quote-unquote right stuff but the wrong sex to fly in space. The reality was they weren't a unit. They weren't a group like you kind of see the male astronauts were at the time. The Mercury 7, they were dubbed by the press in the late 50s, 1959, when they were introduced. They were a group. They trained together. They were very much a unit. The women never all met. The women were never all in the same place. And even though they did medical testing, medical testing doesn't clear you to do something specialized like fly in space in an era where literally everything was unknown. Like, your eyeballs might distort in zero gravity. That was a real concern people had in the early 60s. So not only that, but the women weren't all in agreement about what the best next step for them in this kind of desire to fly in space was. Some of them thought that, really causing a stir and getting media attention was the best way to potentially force NASA into allowing them to fly in space. Some felt that it was going about things the wrong way, that it was going to piss off the right people and make sure that they had no chance in space. So not only were they not a coherent group, they weren't all in agreement. They were backing different paths. They some of them thought that it was a real program. Some of them thought that it wasn't. It was a very messy thing that we've kind of put this banner of the Mercury 13 over because it sounds really good on TV. We haven't really had a need to spend that much money and put people's lives at risk to go to the moon. We did it in the 60s because of a need to beat the Soviet Union and to express technological dominance. That was an expression of the Cold War. And, Apollo lost funding. We didn't see the program through. The last 3 missions were canceled and things were scaled down big time, and we never had the money to continue it. So when you look at like the lack of a Cold War, the lack of a kind of global conflict that's pushing it forward, coupled with NASA has a tiny fraction of its budget that it had in the 60s. It just hasn't really been in the cards. And I have had this conversation with friends recently of, we're going back to the moon soonish, but why? It is still that question of like, we don't have that big need aside from kind of inspiration, which is in itself a need, but there's no overarching plan that is kind of obvious. It's a little bit loose. So it's interesting that we're kind of thinking about doing it now, but Apollo inspired a whole generation of engineers. So maybe we'll get that again. We'll get that influx of people kind of pursuing science careers, which would be good for the planet, I think.
No, it certainly would be. It would be interesting. Lastly, I'll end with a question based on this planet. I know you have been a boxing enthusiast from time to time. Saturday, a big fight out of the United Kingdom: Tyson Fury versus Dillian White for the WBC and the Ring Heavyweight Championship and the WBC Interim Heavyweight Championship. It should be a pretty big deal, and it's taking place in London. Do you have somebody that you're taking in this fight?
No, I don't. Whenever I've watched fights, it's usually with my boxing coach to look at the way they're moving around opponents so I can try to understand why I keep getting hit in the face.
Well, I think people do anything to get a look at that tattoo on your bicep. So I think a lot of folks will take the chance. Hey, Amy, thanks so much. I really appreciate the time this morning. And if people are interested in buying your book, I hope they'll do so. The book is called Fighting for Space. And you also have another book called Breaking the Chains of Gravity, which we'll talk about next time you're on the show. Thanks so much.
Sounds good. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye. If you want to comment on any portion of our discussion, you can give me a call, 1-800-848-WABC. That's 800-848-9222. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead. A former assistant principal is suing a Virginia school board. Now, before I tell you why she's suing, I think that you need to understand, as I've always tried to give you this disclaimer, that you have to be very careful when you make judgments about a case based on only one side of a lawsuit. That's why a lot of times I don't report them, because everything that a plaintiff claims in a lawsuit could be total nonsense. And that's why when there's a jury verdict or a judge verdict in a lawsuit, that carries a much different weight. Like the story we did the other day with the fella who was fired because the workplace celebrated his birthday, and then the jury gave him $450,000. That's different than just allegations in a lawsuit. That being said, I find this to be so emblematic of where we are in society today. So I'm going to read you some of the highlights of this and invite you to comment. And then we'll discuss the Long Island serial killer and the updates on that front. A former assistant principal is suing a Virginia school board, claiming that she was forced out of her job for a slip of the tongue during a mandatory anti-racism training based on critical race theory. Emily Mace, M-A-I-S, Emily, who was the assistant principal at Agnerhurt Elementary School, accused the school district in this lawsuit that was filed yesterday of pushing her out in the fall of last year after she mistakenly used the words colored people as she railed against the training session. Though she apologized for the, quote, slip of the tongue, a teacher's aide who is black verbally attacked her in front of all training attendees. That's what the lawsuit claims. So we only have one side of this story. The aide accused her of, quote, speaking like old racists who told people of color to go to the back of the bus. Following that training, May said that multiple colleagues told her that the teacher's aide and her friends were openly calling her vulgar names at work, including that white racist B word and that two-faced racist B word. Mays complained to the principal that the harassment was causing her substantial emotional distress, preventing her from focusing on her job, and making it impossible for her to effectively manage the employees involved in the harassment. But the principal refused to take any action to address her concerns, again, only according to one side of this complaint. So she submitted her resignation on August 29th and left her job on September 10th after being forced to apologize to her colleagues in what her lawyers described as ritual shaming. This is from the lawsuit, on information and belief, from beginning to end, the apology meeting was carefully orchestrated by district officials to humiliate, shame, and traumatize Ms. Mays for an accidental slip of the tongue in order to make an example of her and to communicate to other district employees to the type of punishment that would occur if anyone dared question the new reigning anti-racist orthodoxy, which is racist at its core. That's what the filing says. So, give me your take on this. 800-848-WABC. That's 800-848-9222. It's interesting. So, this is a 45-page lawsuit filed by the conservative Christian legal advocacy group, the Alliance Defending Freedom, on her behalf. And they're seeking back pay, compensatory damages, and punitive damages, as well as attorney fees. Now, I can buy a lot of this. I buy that there was a slip of the tongue. I buy that one of the other teacher's aides lambasted her in front of everybody. And I buy that they called her names, including white racist B word. I buy all that. Okay, because it just strikes me as where we are today. Now, here's where I don't know that she should get any money. She submitted her resignation on August 29th and left her job on September 10th after being forced to apologize. She submitted her resignation and left her job. She wasn't fired for this. She may not have liked having to apologize. It might have been an uncomfortable workplace situation for us. So maybe you complain to your union. Maybe you file a grievance. Maybe you even sue. But to quit your job and then file a lawsuit, I don't know about you. That's where, I don't know, I feel like she's trying to make lemonade out of lemons here. First of all, colored people used to be a very acceptable term. And in fact, the NAACP, and I believe that's still the case, but for many years, it called the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So it's only relatively recently that that's become a super offensive term. So I don't begrudge her for having slip of the tongue. I don't think she should have been lambasted by a colleague. I don't think she should have been mistreated and called a name. It's just then when you quit and then file a lawsuit, then that's where I think maybe she's trying to capitalize on this a little bit.
But yeah, I understand that, but that's only a possibility. You're being presumptive, and if she's a Christian, you got to think she's a truthful person. Christian people don't generally. They're truthful. You have to be truthful as Christian,
well,
right?
First of all,
she would be corrupting her faith to do that.
A couple of things, right? I'm not monitoring her church attendance. I don't know how often she's going to church. Two, I don't know that she's a Christian. I know that the conservative Christian group, the Alliance Defending Freedom, is representing her. But the fact that she is a Christian has no basis in my evaluation of this lawsuit. I've known a lot of Christians that are just as capable of lying as atheists or Muslims or Jews or anybody else. So that holds no weight as far as I'm concerned. Bob's in the Bronx. Hello, Bob.
As a person without color, I'm offended that she's offended. All she did was make a mistake in the order of words. People of color are colored people.
All right, so you're offended at what exactly?
Hello.
Yeah, Bob, thank you. Jimmy's on Staten Island. Hello, Jimmy.
Hello, Frank. Knock it off. Not you, but everybody in society. I mean, this one's looking for a lawsuit. There's no lawsuit. Tell the lady, oh, I made a mistake. Knock it off.
You and I are
tough.
on the same page here, right, Jimmy? This is just...
Yeah, but be tough.
Yeah.
Well, if I made a mistake with my word, all right, knock it off. You want to bust my chops? Go ahead. And then I call a cop, I call this, I call superintendents. Right away, I agree with you. The floodlights come on. When this other guy, Adams, over there said if white crackers, what I got to do? Get a whole group of people from Staten Island to go make a scene and make this and that? Too much. People got to live and do what they got to do. Stop. Everybody's waiting for that one word, that one sound that don't sound right to them.
Right.
And ba-ba-boom, they make malaparut. We can't have it no more. Society's melting down. Who cares about this teacher with people getting killed in the other side of Europe? Inflation all the way up. People getting killed, pushed in subways, a woman stabbed 60 times. I give a flying fig about this teacher who got a Valentina and then stay home.
Thank you, Jimmy. Well said. I think Jimmy is, without the reference to the flying fig, he's saying exactly what I'm saying. I think it's terrible for somebody to be reproached for a slip of the tongue. I think an uncomfortable work environment is awful, but was a lawsuit necessary? Everybody's got to run to court. Now, let me tap into the political aspects of your brain for a second. You were the longtime chairman of the New York State Independence Party. That's the capacity that I first got to know you in over 22 years ago. And I know you've spent the better part of your life working towards building a vibrant independent alternative to the two-party duopoly. And you've also known, at least politically, Andrew Cuomo for some time. There's been some talk that Andrew Cuomo might actually run this year for governor as an independent or a third-party candidate. Do you lend any credence to that, knowing the independent movement as well as you do, knowing Andrew Cuomo's political motives as well as you do? What's your take on that?
There was a pretty heavy rumor that, and this was unbelievable, but I took it seriously when it came out of Albany, that Tom Suozzi, who is thought to not have a great chance against Governor Hochul in the Democratic primary. He's a moderate congressman, former county executive in Nassau County, but there was some serious talk, speculation at least, that Suozzi was going to complete his petition to run in that primary, drop out, and give the line to Andrew Cuomo. Now, folks who know the two men realize they don't like each other, and and a lot of people said that'll never happen. And as it turns out, they were right. I don't know that there wasn't an effort by Cuomo to get Suozzi's petition, because he started running ads. If you remember, he started spending some of his $17 million on ads talking about what he's done or how he sees New York and the future and so forth. He did some serious ads and spent some bucks doing that. So I think he thought he had a shot at Suozzi's.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now I don't know that for sure. It turned out to be a non-starter. But if he runs as an independent, you would have to believe that he's trying to peel votes away and let the Republicans win so that he can come back in 4 years and run against, maybe Lee Zeldin or one of Harry Wilson, Andrew Giuliani, or Astorino, if Astorino has any chance.
But do you think, knowing Cuomo's political moves as you do, I mean, he's run third party before as a name on the ballot with the Liberal Party in 2002, but he didn't campaign actively. Do you think that's something that he would do? Do you think he'd risk handing the governor's mansion to the Republicans and damaging potentially his own reputation further in Democratic circles in order to come back and try and take back the office in 4 years?
Well, you and I both know that the idea of running an independent has more to do with affecting an election and has to do with establishing a third party in the state. And we got knocked off. The Independence Party lost ballot status in 2020 when they changed the laws, and the presidential candidate we had, Brock Pierce, failed to get the 130,000 votes or whatever the margin is now, whatever the threshold is now. Andrew Cuomo, if he runs as an independent, may try to establish a minor party line, or if he puts somebody up to run as an independent and tries to get to that threshold, he may try to affect some kind of change by utilizing that third party line. I don't know. I don't even know that he's doing the petition. I imagine we're going to find out soon. It's a lot of signatures, and it's a lot of signatures because of him and Jay Jacobs wanting to get rid of the working families and Jacobs wanting to get rid of the Independence Party. They upped the number to 50,000, I think it is, or something. So you got to figure you'd have to get 75,000 to hope to get 50,000 good ones, and you need, I think, 23 congressional districts have to be represented with a certain amount of signatures. It's a difficult task to do, and the irony is, right now they would love to get Brian Benjamin off, right? And I don't know the latest on Brian Benjamin. The Democrats would love to clear him, and the way they could have cleared him is through an independent line, nominating him for maybe senator or governor, and allow a new lieutenant governor to take the place of Benjamin. And the irony is that the Dems who did that now, who wiped us out, try to prevent us.
Right, now they have to deal with the same 45,000 signatures they screwed us with.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, very interesting.
Is it 25,000?
No, 45,000.
45,000. Right. Wow, it's an enormous number, and it's maybe poetic justice that
exactly.
They can't get off.
So the ratings came out at noon yesterday. They're through the roof. They're through the roof. Not only for this show, but for the whole station. The whole station. We're killing it. Absolutely killing it. In fact, there's a post on the New York radio message board, and one guy writes, probably their highest ratings since the Bob Grant days, 3.8 overall. WOR is way behind. And then a user by the name of Sid comments the following. Look at the morning show's ratings for months now. No one on this board ever has anything nice to say about Bernie and Sid. Time to wake up and admit a lot of you are dead wrong about us! Exclamation point. So clearly, while that person only signed his name Sid, that's clearly Sid Rosenberg.
I'm insane.
Why he engages with these knuckleheads on the New York radio message board, I don't understand it. But congratulations. I didn't see the morning show numbers, but I saw the overall station numbers, and they were great. Now, let's talk about this program. In the category, basically the 12-plus category, I'll spare you a lot of jargon, but it's basically everybody that's listening over the age of 12, we killed it. We did.
Wow.
We've done a 21 share. A 21 share. Now, what that means is that essentially 1 out of every 5 radios, more, that's on right now in the New York area, New York metro area, is tuned to this station. 1 out of every 5. Our nearest competitor is 1010 Wins. We did double what they've done. And in the average rating number, we did a 0.2. A 0.2, which is very difficult to do in overnight hours. Now, a lot of people always say, well, what about this group? What about that demo? Now, in the category of men, 35-64, which is always a category that we struggle with on this show because we appeal to women, we appeal to older folks, we appeal to everybody, which I like. I just like people that are living and listening. In men 35-64, we're tied for number 1 in that category too.
Spectacular.
Now, think of that. With everything that was going on in March, the drama over the baseball season, the football, everything, the NBA, the run-up to the playoffs, we're tied with the Fan in men 35-64.
I'm the man.
So a 9.8 share in men 35-64. Now that's incredible. So big thank you to everybody that has made this possible. And I haven't seen all the numbers yet. I imagine we'll go through them Friday at our meeting. But Dominic also number one in his time slot, and Rita Cosby also number one in her time slot as well. So congratulations to the whole station and everybody that made this ratings book possible. So
Let the church say amen.
So we get to live to fight another day. So I can relax for another month. Because if the ratings ever go down, even slightly, then you have all sorts of people that want to tweak what you're doing, right? They say, well, the reason that you went from a 12 share to an 11 share is you're not doing enough of this, or you're not giving the time enough, or you're not giving the temperature enough, or you're not doing enough traffic, or you're not helping people out of traffic jams. Everyone's got their own 2 cents. But since the ratings keep going up, this is our highest number ever on this show, then I guess I don't expect that we're going to be told to change anything. Molly's here. Molly, how many streaming services do you and your longtime companion have?
Waiting for Matt to turn on my mic. There we go.
Believe it. Now you know how I feel. See, sitting here, you guys get a new appreciation.
Your own mic on.
I know, but while someone is struggling to speak into a microphone that just doesn't seem to want to be turned on and turned up, you could see now how frustrating that is.
Usually
blah,
the frustration
blah,
is
blah, blah, blah.
coming from me.
Yes.
That's a direct quote from me. Blah, blah, blah.
Tell me about
That's
it.
what I sound like to Frank, I'm sure. How many streaming services? HBO, Hulu, YouTube TV.
You pay for that? YouTube TV?
I don't pay for it.
Well, I know, but does somebody in your household pay for it?
I don't think even in my household. I think that's an extended
All right,
family
so that's
find.
three.
Spotify, Tidal.
What's Tidal? I never even heard of that.
It's Jay-Z, right?
You don't have Netflix?
No. Oh, we have Netflix, but my mom pays for that one.
I see. All right.
It's kind of hard to. I pay for the HBO. He pays for the Hulu. We have our own Spotify accounts. He has the Tidal account, but would you count Adobe as a subscription service?
No, I don't think so. Matt Blaze, what about you? About how many streaming services do you
Besides regular cable, which I do have.
Me too.
Hulu, YouTube Premium.
You got that you have to pay for, right?
Yeah.
Because the premium and the title.
Premium, so I don't have to watch ads on YouTube. So YouTube Premium. Peacock I get for free.
How do you get it for free? How do you pull that off?
It's with the cable company. It's part of the subscription.
I see, okay.
Netflix, Prime Video, Apple Music.
Okay, so I am so I have Netflix. I have Peacock. I'm on my brother's account for that, the souped up one, so I can watch the wrestling. I have Hulu. Well, Rachel has Hulu. I have Amazon Prime, and I feel like I have 3 or 4 others that I'm forgetting. There's a bunch of others.
As soon as you started listing streaming services, I realized that I have access to at least 3 more of those. So the list goes on.
Right. The Paramount Plus, that's where I'm watching Picard. There's just too many. And like any bubble that is being blown up, yesterday could have been a pivotal day in the streaming bubble. Now, I want you to understand, those of us that grew up in an era of 3 channels, and then that became an era of 57 channels and nothing on, and then it became an era of 2,000 channels, and now we're in an era of just being able to speak into your microphone on your remote control and pull up whatever you want to watch. This is a new age. We've seen the streamers, including the platforms I just mentioned, dominate. Yesterday was a banner day because for the first time in history, Netflix announced that they lost subscribers. They lost subscribers for the first time in more than 10 years. Their shares cratered 25%. That's streamer story number 1. Streamer story number 2. Now, they're still more valuable than Disney, still more value. And think about that. Think of all the people Disney has hired all over the world, all the theme parks, the people making the movies, the this, the that. Netflix is more valuable and has more money than Disney. Apple, same thing. Jon Stewart is also struggling in terms of getting something going on his streaming platform. The streamers have owned these award shows. The Oscars this year dominated by Netflix and everything else. And really, so many of the good shows, it seems like, are on these streaming networks. The Jon Stewart TV show. Now, you got to understand, Jon Stewart, for 16, 17 years, was the most popular thing on cable television. And he was dominant on The Daily Show. His Apple TV Plus show, The Problem with Jon Stewart, has turned out to be quite problematic. It debuted in September. It has failed to gain traction in its first season, and it's lagging far behind its competitors on broadcast and on cable TV. Last fall, about 180,000 U.S. homes saw the show's first episode within the first 7 days. By the fifth episode, which aired in early March, it was down to only about 40,000 homes tuning in, down 78% from the season premiere. Now, by comparison, an episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, just sort of a similar format, was seen by 844,000 homes. So Jon Stewart, the most watched guy on cable when it comes to that format, he's not able to gain traction on streaming. Lastly, this is all news that's breaking this week on the streaming front. Warner Brothers and Discovery have suspended all external marketing money for CNN Plus. They've now laid off CNN's chief financial officer as they are weighing what to do with this CNN Plus streaming service. That's the one that Chris Wallace went to. I passed a big old billboard of it here in Manhattan the other day. Now, inside CNN, it's being reported that executives think the launch has been successful. Discovery executives, which just merged with CNN, disagree. CNN Plus has about 150,000 subscribers so far. Warner Brothers and Discovery want to eventually build one giant service around HBO Max. So new leadership has replaced the CNN CFO, and other high-level positions at Warner Media are in a state of flux. Sources say a plan's being considered to replace Chris Cuomo's program on regular CNN with a live newscast instead of a personality-driven perspective. Wouldn't that be nice? That would be interesting. So CNN's original plan was for CNN Plus to become profitable in 4 years by investing $1 billion into the service. Imagine that, $1 billion. A profitable streaming service would have diversified CNN's revenue long-term around a digital asset. Everybody wants that now, digital asset. CNN Plus launched on Roku last week. It should have prompted a subscription boost, but with marketing now suspended around the service, there are concerns that growth is going to be short-lived, and this point of pride among CNN staffers is how smoothly the app has been working technologically, but apparently no one's watching. There's 150,000 subscribers. That's well short of expectations. And executives believe that the service wasn't being kneecapped. Its growth rate would rival other outlets like the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, which have about 2.9 million subscribers. But the analogy that some are arguing is that assumes customers would get the same product on CNN Plus that they do with CNN's linear channel. That's not the case. Internal data is showing that the shows that do well on TV are shows that have that mimic other TV programs, like Reliable Sources Daily with Brian Stelter, or Five Things with Kate Baldwin. So it's very interesting to see. I'm curious what you think, if you think this streaming bubble is about to burst. Because remember, we've seen this before with other forms of technology. Remember what a big thing MoviePass was, that app where you could pay a fee and see as many movies as you wanted? It blew up. Didn't work. Is this the beginning of the end for the dominance of the streamers? Or have people's viewing habits so changed over the years that there's no changing it now?
Well, I'm always interested in history and the truth. And in terms of accomplishment of people that are to be admired for things that were done. Keep in mind when they built the LaGuardia Airport, it was started in 1937 and finished in 1939. 2 years. Can you imagine? Imagine building.
We can't do a ribbon cutting for something in these days in 2 years.
Yeah, and you know he came in and did so much. He was mayor for 12 years. He accomplished everything. He and his builder Robert Moses. They accomplished everything. Built the tunnels. They built they did everything. In fact, let me see. I'm going to ask my wife to get me the book. I want to see if I can read some of the accomplishments. Honey, this is unusual. Hey, honey, unusual radio.
Hey, well, we'll take it. That's what you never know what to expect on the other side of midnight. I love it.
Anyway. The accomplishments for that this man did. He cleaned up, the crime that was going on. He had a lot of callones. You know what I mean?
Mm.
He was brave and just took on everything. Took on the gangsters. Took on
Tammany Hall and just political corruption in general.
So much crime going on. Back in those days, he was mayor from 1934 to 1947, I believe. I mean, that's been a long time since I've done the show. So 12 years, whatever that is. And the accomplishments that he did, as I'm talking to you, I'm looking them up right now, if I can get to the page. But anyway, he whatever. Let me see. Let me see. He did the PAL, the Police Athletic League. He created that with his commissioner. You can't imagine the things that this man did for the city, and it just goes on. It just goes on and on about. That's what inspires me about him. And I can't find it at this moment. Let me see.
That's okay. We'll take your word for it that he was pretty accomplished, and I guess that's LaGuardia's ghost way of telling you it's time to do a fourth version of a LaGuardia stage play starring Tony Lobianco. It's funny. Go ahead.
I got it. Let me give you these quick things that he accomplished, just because he's one of the great men. He says, thanks to Moses, we've given you 14 public housing developments, 15 outdoor swimming pools, 25 new hospitals, 95 new schools, 340 playgrounds, 360 tennis courts, redoing all of Central Park and putting in a brand new zoo, the Belt Parkway and the Marine Parkway in Brooklyn, the Bronx Whitestone Bridge, the Triborough Bridge, the Reese Park Bridge in Queens, the Queens Midtown Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, and let's not forget the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, the East River Drive, the West Side Highway, the Henry Hudson Parkway, the Grand Central Parkway, and when all our work is finished, driving your own car in New York City will be a pleasure.
I'll tell you, I had been wondering what the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel was called originally. Now we know it was called the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. If you're able to work in radio for 65 years, that's something only a handful of people in history can say. So I know, I don't think I got to meet Sid. I think I spoke to him on the phone a few times, booking him on other radio shows, but I know a lot of his fans are going to miss him. I know a lot of Sinatra fans are going to miss him. And I know a lot of his family and his friends are going to miss him as well. So condolences to everybody as we remember Sid Mark. All right, your opportunity now to be heard for 15 seconds at 800-848-WABC. It's time for
The Other Side of Midnight. This is 15 Seconds of Fame.
Mike in Montclair.
Good morning, Frank. Excuse me. A suggestion for Carmine's irregular sleep patterns? A dry martini and a good book will help put him in slumberland.
Not bad. Henry in Manhattan.
Hi, Frank. One thing that doesn't seem to have come up is often people are encouraged to write their senator or write the president about an issue. How about people?
Mike in Staten Island.
Hey, good morning, Frank. Awesome, Tony Lobianco, and especially how he's able to conform to the times by saying he has to learn how to switch his complete systems to the other side.
Oh, absolutely. And lastly, Troy in West Babylon.
Hickory dickory dope. Donald Trump is a big fat lump. I'm on the street to be sexy to find the guys who get home.
Thank you, Troy. Everybody else, we'll have more time for this tomorrow, I hope. In the meantime, stay tuned for the WABC Early News with the great Deb Valentine. You'll hear me do the business report during that hour. And then from 6 to 10, hear Bernie and Sid, their guests today, Judge Janine Pirro. Frank Moreno, good day.